This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place Nation Pop Experience Making Mount Rushmore is back after a ever so brief hiatus. Hey there, I am your host / moderator, Andy Atherton, and welcome tonight. Tonight we have a panel I'm quite familiar with. It's actually you could call this a spin-off of Pop Goes to the Couch, because I have all three gentlemen. I do that wonderful pod that's on hiatus just because, we're in between shows to review weekly, but that should be changing very soon, hopefully. Let's get them in here, and let's start giving our list tonight. First off, we got Shawn Kidd. Hey, Shawn.
Good evening, Andy. It's good to have the band back together. It's been a little while, and I'm very excited about tonight's topics, although a little bit torn, which we'll talk about as we get into it.
All right. As we usually do when we pod together. Also, is Scott Shifflett is here.
Guys, I'm glad to be back with y'all. We're here on Earth 1 right now, about to have Crisis on Infinite podcast, I feel. So I can't wait to where we go.
Yeah, all right. And rounding out the crew as usual is Tim Capel. Hey, Tim.
Hey, yeah, I trust by the end of this thing, the podcast will be torn asunder. But yeah, I like this. I have to say, this Pop Goes to the Couch edition of Making Mount Rushmore, while we're on, a bit of a hiatus or between seasons, we'll put it that way. It's sort of like a themed edition of the old Family Feud from the early '90s. If you ever watched any like WWF versions of the Family Feud, we may be quite the feuding family here as this thing goes on.
Yes, I hope Pop Goes to the Couch doesn't implode tonight on itself.
It's quite possible.
It could happen. But, the reason why these guys are all here is because we're talking about comic book superheroes, all, geek stuff, stuff these guys are, experts on. And we've already talked about the villains. And actually, one of the first episodes, either the first or second episode, I'm quickly scrolling through. It was actually our second episode of this very podcast. We did the villains. Now we're going to do the heroes. Maybe not as fun and exciting, maybe a little more polarizing too. But we'll see how it goes. So we're going to start off with the DC heroes, the ones that I grew up with.
The best, Andy. The best.
All right.
I'd love to make a list, but mine would be purely based off cartoons and stuff, and it would have been bad. So, I mean, would have gotten yelled at for having Zan and Jaina on there. No, just kidding. All right, well, let's start off with Shawn. Shawn, give us your first entry on your DC hero, Mount Rushmore.
All right, I appreciate you starting with the worst comics line first, Andy, so thank you for doing that. It's much appreciated. Shut up, Scott. My first pick is The Flash, and the reason why I picked The Flash, DC is a very unique universe. I know I shit on him a lot, and I apologize, but I feel like when you look at Mount Rushmore DC, you have your other ones that I'll talk about later that are kind of that tier, and then you kind of go into those second level folks a little bit, and I feel like Flash, he's got his own TV show. I used to watch him in the cartoons. He's been in the movies. He has his own movie coming out. He had a movie or a TV show back in the 80s. I feel like the Flash is a good representation of a DC character. He's also had multiple crossovers. We have multiple Flashes, Golden Age Flash, this Flash. I don't know how you do a Mount Rushmore without Flash in DC, so I went with Flash number one.
Which Flash, Shawn?
It's irrelevant. Just pick one. It's a Flash.
I
would say Barry Allen more than any of them. I'd go Barry Allen.
I kind of agree with that statement, which I'll get into as I go through my sort of rationale as well.
Yep. Well, Tim also had it on his list.
Okay, well, great segue then. I had the Flash. He was actually my fourth pick, so he was the one where I feel like that seat was the most open.
Same for me. My fourth. He was my fourth.
Yeah. So DC, I mean, Shawn, you kind of shit on them as the inferior company. I'm a Marvel zombie through and through as well. I'm trying to be diplomatic here, but I'll just say that for DC, I mean, this was a real softball kind of Mount Rushmore for me, where there was, I'll just say, I mean, 3 right off the bat that were super easy that most people would universally agree upon unless you're just trying to be a contrarian. And so it was that 4th where I was like, well, you could go here, you could go there. I think there's a few valid choices, again, for that 4th slot that, you know, I could hear the arguments for and against. Flash, to me, though, kind of same as Shawn. It's like he's got a lot of mainstream recognition. So there's been, you know, 2 pretty well-received TV series, live-action TV series over the years. I mean, been around in the comics since the Golden Age, of course. As far as the legacy hero concept, going into this exercise, this Mount Rushmore, I kind of looked at the whole legacy angle as more of a liability than it was a benefit to the character. Only because maybe this is just me personally, but I always have it in my head that the more iterations, the more different versions of the same character you have, different people, you know, with the same name and the same costume, even potentially, the more you really just dilute your brand and sort of confuse the marketplace. And I think that gets kind of out of control with one character / franchise in particular that maybe he'll make someone's list, maybe he won't, we'll see. But with Flash, I think it's a lot more straightforward. Yes, you have that Golden Age Flash, but nobody knows who that is, really. So it's really between, like, Barry and Wally, right? And even in popular depictions, mainstream kind of contemporary depictions of, like, Barry Allen, the TV show and stuff like that, they kind of just give him Wally's personality. So they really do make the 2 very interchangeable, to the point that I don't think that kind of confusion really exists in the minds of the public, when really you're just dealing with the 2 characters. And for fuck's sake, they even have the same origin, right? I mean, I know Wally started out as, like, Kid Flash, but once Barry was out of the picture, you know, after Crisis, Wally stepped right in. It's not like we were ever without a Flash. And I think they've done a good job of protecting that. DC has done a decent job of protecting that character just sort of as a brand name, more so than some of their other legacy heroes where it's gotten kind of all over the place and just hard to keep up with. So anyway, that's my long-winded rationale for why the Flash over somebody else.
All right. Scott had it as an honorable mention.
Yeah, like Tim was saying, like, the first 3 spots are pretty solidified, which we'll get to. I chose Flash as my honorable mention. I went with Barry Allen specifically because, like, at a personal standpoint, like, I jumped into comics really big in May of 2011, and that's when Flashpoint was going on, which was, like, the perfect jumping on point for comics. And I just enjoy that. And, like, also, like, going back and reading older comics with, like, the Infinite Crisis, where he plays a pretty big role in that as well. And as Tim said, like, you know, he with the TV shows, and he has, like, the movie coming up, which is going to be the Flashpoint movie. And, you know, I know the DCEU hasn't been that well received. That could be a whole nother podcast in itself and how it's broken me. But he's just one of the main ones you see, like, the from the Big Bang Theory, that guy was always wearing a Flash shirt. So, like, you know, the memorabilia is everywhere. He's one of the main people you think of with DC, which, to be honest with you guys, I thought the DC, like, I didn't have that many honorable mentions with DC, but I have a whole lot more for Marvel. And I'm like, you know, Tim and Shawn are Marvel guys. I'm more of a DC guy, but I just felt like the DC list was a whole lot easier compared to the Marvel list.
That's because Marvel. It's because DC has overall crappy superheroes. That's why.
All right, Scott, give us an entry on your list.
All right, I'm gonna go with Batman. Everyone knows who Batman is. He's my overall number 1 if we were gonna rank these in order. He's everywhere. I mean, Jesus, like, the action figures I was reading something online today that they sold so much of the 1989 merch that it would have been over like $1.3 billion in today's money. So people were starved for that movie. I can't tell you how many times I watched the Batman movies growing up.
It was Batmania, man.
Yeah, the original, I didn't see the 1960 version until like later on, but like, the Michael Keaton one, and then like, I made my dad take us to go see Batman and Robin. As a kid, I loved it. Looking back, that shit's terrible. But just remember being so excited for it. Batman also has like the great like Arkham series. Andy, I know you've played a couple of those, I believe. They're just, everyone just knows. And like, out of all the Marvel movies that comes out, the best superhero movie in my mind is Dark Knight. And that trilogy is close. I put it up against the Marvel trilogies, but like it may edge out. Like I think Captain America may edge it out personally, in my personal, for the rankings for the overall trilogy. But Dark Knight is just amazing. Everyone knows Bruce Wayne. Everyone knows the story. I mean, hell, look how many movies we've had since 1989. We've had, it's gonna be like at least 8 or 9, maybe 10. Like I'm just going off the top of my head right now. Since then, everyone has their own favorite Batmans. Like I think Christian Bale is probably my favorite Batman. I'm sure that's going to piss off some people, but Batfleck was pretty decent. He had shitty material because Zack Snyder is a hack. But like I said, that's a whole other story. I'm sorry. Hey, that's the truth. Like he's a piece of shit. The whole Martha thing really pisses me off. He's not a piece of shit. I'm sorry. I'm getting a little heated, but I realized what I said. But the whole like Superman and Batman stopping to fight each other because your mom's name is Martha too is the dumbest shit I ever heard. I audibly groaned in the theater. Sean would have been proud of me. I walked out of that theater pissed. But I just love me some Batman. Like
the ultimate cut is a little bit better. He said,
"I've heard that." Yeah. I mean,
but Martha is still in there.
Yeah. It's like, oh, Martha. It's like, get the fuck out of here, man. Like, really? But I love me some Batman. And go check out the Arkham video games. That's all I can say. And Gotham was pretty great, and like Batman was quasi in it. So yeah, Batman's my number one overall if we were doing like actual rankings for the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. Well, Batman I loved him growing up because he's the leader, I guess, of the Super Friends. I always considered him. Love the Michael Keaton one. We've talked about that. There is a great episode of Blockbuster Rewind that Sean was on with us where we did that, and I made you watch the 1966.
You sure did.
I did.
Sharker
I still go on the Batman coaster in New Jersey at Great Adventure, and it's themed to the '89 Batman. Still have the music when you walk in, you could hear it, and it just every time I pop because it's like this is like the best Batman ever. Yeah, I liked Dark Knight is awesome. Don't get me wrong, but the whole trilogy on a whole, Batman Begins, after going back and rewatching it's not as high on my list, and neither is Dark Knight Rises, but the Dark Knight is just a masterpiece.
And Andy, I forgot to even mention, look at all the comics that we've actually seen. The Long Halloween, which is just amazing. Batman Year One, another good one. Hush, Dark Victory, so many of those. And hell, I know not a lot of people like it. I enjoyed Tom King's run of Batman, and also Scott Snyder's run of Batman, which gave us Court of Owls, which I can't wait for it to be adapted. I know it's adapted in Gotham, but I want either an animated movie or actual movie with the Court of Owls, because I think that would be great. Also, Batman Hush, just all of these, and when he gets his back broken, I can't even think of the name. It's I want to say
Nightfall.
Yeah, Nightfall. I almost said Night Quest, the sequel. That's just like think of all those that I just named. Just amazing ones. They're I'm in my quote unquote Scotty room, and I can see the comics right now as I'm looking at them. It's just great.
All right. Tim had him on his list as well. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you're thinking if you don't have Batman on this. What are you, some kind of asshole? It's just... talk about a character that has truly infiltrated all media. Andy, I mean, you mentioned roller coasters. We're talking about how many comics characters make the leap to theme park attractions. Scott mentioned video
a
games.
lot these days, but that one.
Well,
does
I mean,
hold up.
traditionally speaking,
Yes.
you know, like, I mean, he had a fucking roller coaster in the 90s. So
Yes.
we're talking Six Flags, like back before comics really exploded. Scott mentioned video games. You know, you've got toys, of course. You've got movies. You've got television, and to say nothing of the comics. Actually, Scott makes a good point as well about the character has a really strong comics pedigree, which it sounds like it should be a no-brainer for all of the characters on these lists. But as we're going to go through, it's sort of like, yeah, they're major characters, but are they necessarily the best comics? A little shaky. But Batman does like have overall, like, you know, probably more good stories than bad, right? And some truly, truly iconic and fantastic stories along the way. He's got a good batting average, no doubt. It's just one of those characters that before you even know what a comic book is, you know who the character is. And that to me is kind of Mount Rushmore defining. So, I mean, what more can I really say? It's Batman.
All right. Shawn had as well as a clean sweep.
Yeah, he would be my number one for DC too. Scott brought up a lot of, but you know, there was a time where Batman was the comic that I always wanted to read. It was kind of like when they were doing those, like you brought up Nightfall, but Cataclysm and No Man's Land. They had a really good serial of like comics and stories that they really were knocking it out of the park with Batman. And listen, the first Batman I ever saw was that the 66 Batman series, and they had Super Friends, the freaking Filmation one that had Batmite in it. Andy, I'm sure you're familiar with that one.
Scooby-Doo.
That Batmite. Yeah. So Scooby-Doo, I mean, he is just mainstream. His stories are great. His character's great. His Rogues Gallery is probably one of my favorites. I mean, the Joker. I mean,
all-time great.
All-time, just like, and I could possibly say for me, and I can't believe I'm going to say it, but I'm going to be even keeled. Batman might be my absolute favorite hero out of any single hero that we have in the comics. He might be my number one, and yes, he's DC. But it's okay to have a good one when the rest of them are shit because he's.
Oh my God, there it is.
So. Yeah, 100% all in on Batman. It's got to be on anybody.
Look, we'd be remiss in not mentioning Batman, the animated series, which is not only...
How we forget that? Yes.
Yeah, well, not only a great Batman cartoon, but is regarded as one of the all-time great American animated series ever. That's not just a Batman thing, not just a Superman thing. I mean, it is well regarded.
And even that movie on was it Mask of the Phantasm? Is that
yes, that's really
phenomenal animated movie. Just great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've heard great things about those animated films from the what was it, the late 90s, early 2000s, right? All those were coming out.
Well, Mask of the Phantasm was a theatrical release. That was like 93, 94.
Yeah, it came out during Batman the series, so it's the same animation, same. I mean, that's just a fantastic movie.
Yeah, and then they did do some direct to video stuff later on. Of course, you know, he's a big component of the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, like all these characters we're going to be talking about for DC.
And Batman and the Outsiders I was a big fan of that series when that came out too. So yeah, he's just a freaking awesome character.
Yeah, you mentioned Scooby-Doo. I'm like sitting there, I'm looking at the list. I'm like, how come Blue Falcon didn't make anybody's list? For Space Ghost.
Who was the Native American who had size changing powers?
Oh,
Apache Chief.
Apache Chief. There we go.
Yes, he looked choke. He used to say on the Super Friends. I know that one.
DC Tatanka.
God, I hated Super Friends so much.
Yes, and he had the unchallenged Super Friends. He went up against, what was her name? Gigant.
Oh yeah, the big giant woman. I don't remember.
Yeah, she in the Legion of Doom.
Yeah, she was in the Legion of Doom.
Yes.
God, I hated Super Friends. I hated it so much.
How do you hate Super Friends? Now we're getting on
because I'm not as old. Because y'all are Gen Xers and I'm an elder millennial. So the only Super Friends exposure I had was on like Toonami in the 90s on Cartoon Network, and I'm like, they would like literally show it after an episode of Batman the Animated Series, and I'm like, what is this bullshit?
It was like, where's my Powerpuff Girls?
Well, no, but I mean, it was not like in any way, shape, or form the kind of superhero.
No, I get it too. It was a very generational thing. I totally get
very late 70s, early 80s.
I get it. I totally
Where
get
are the actual fights? Like, where's
awesome.
Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice. Anyway, all right, so we're up to Tim. Tim, give us another entry on your list.
Oh, I guess, I'm going to save the best for last. So I'm going to give it to Wonder Woman next. I mean, what do you want? She's one of the holy trinity of DC Comics. And I hate to say it, but I will go ahead and say the only female representation I have here on Mount Rushmore, but that is kind of saying a lot for a character who, again, dates back to the Golden Age, was created by somewhat of a lunatic, but probably a progressive for his time, by the same token. So it's sort of interesting. But she's just always been at the forefront of DC Comics, DC events, while maybe not like one of their highest sellers, I don't think, in terms of just, volume of comics, moving off the racks. There's never been a period of time where there was not a Wonder Woman comic. Maybe someone correct me if I'm wrong there, but I know she had that reinvention in the 70s where she became more of this like mod sort of martial arts secret agency type character, and that was certainly an interesting direction. But still, like, again, campy though it was, like a pretty good representation of a strong, female superhero. Of course, she has the Linda Carter series from the 70s, which I always thought, like, before I even saw any of it, growing up, I heard about it. I thought it was more in the vein of like the Adam West Batman, right? The 60s Batman, but it's really not. It's quite a good, like kind of 70s action spy drama. It's got its goofy elements, don't get me wrong, but it's a perfectly watchable show today. Like, without any sense of embarrassment, you can sit down and watch that and sort of laugh about the parts that are silly, but it's definitely a show that is more self-aware than I really realized, because it was only in the past few years that I really watched episodes of that. They would air it on Saturday nights on one of those terrestrial cable channels, like
Me TV.
Yes, I was trying to think what it was. Yeah.
Yep.
They would do that. They would do Batman. They would do the Incredible Hulk, and I would just sit there and watch one after the other. And I was like, Wonder Woman's kind of the best of these. A lot of that probably had to do with Linda Carter, but it was what it was. Certainly she's got the 2 films now. Your mileage may vary on those, but nobody doesn't. Once again, like Batman, nobody doesn't know who Wonder Woman is.
Mm-hmm. All right. Sean had her
good comics runs too. Good comics runs too. Whether you're talking the George Perez stuff or the, John Byrne had a little run in there, which maybe is a little divisive, but then you get Greg Rucka, like, always been represented by pretty strong creators on the comic side of the equation.
And probably the first really good DCEU movie that we got, probably. Right?
Yeah.
The sequel? Although I did like parts of the sequel.
Yeah.
But it was just.
I have defended the sequel while acknowledging that is far from a personal favorite. I think it
has its good parts or good elements to it. Just on altogether, though, there's a lot of issues.
Some very strange choices were made.
Yes. All right, Sean.
All right. So I had to put her on by default because she is like a primary. I have never, so full disclosure, I've never ever read a Wonder Woman comic book in my entire life, ever.
Okay.
So my Wonder Woman experience is to the much hated Super Friends show by Tim, the cartoon, the lovely, very well hipped Linda Carter in the fantastic 70s show was one of my first Hachi train experiences was Linda Carter. Very, very beautiful woman. I thought she made a fantastic Wonder Woman. And I will say this, I do agree with you that her movie is probably one of the, next to Aquaman, was probably might still be today my favorite DCU movie. Now, the sequel might be all-time bad. I would compare that as bad as Green Lantern if you ask me, but I got hell for that. I remember that very vividly. But she does have to be there. I mean, Justice League, I mean, we know who the big three are. I think we all know where our next Rushmore person's probably going to go, except for Scott, because I know Scott's going to pick somebody that I'm really going to shit on probably. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like with Batman. Even if I've never read a comic of hers, how do you not put her in the Mount Rushmore? You kind of have to. So I'm with you. I agree. She should definitely be in Mount Rushmore.
All right. Scott had her as well.
Yeah, basically what these guys said. She's known as like the holy trinity of DC with Batman and Superman. So this couldn't really be a real Mount Rushmore, in my opinion, without her. She, as these guys said with the movies, have been hit and miss. The first one was great. The second one was even, I feel like a waste of my time, even during the COVID era. Her comics, I've only really read her with the Justice League comics, but there's been a couple events of hers that I really want to try out and read, which I will be doing since I've got the DC app. Yeah, you just know her. Like, we always see like a bunch of like, that's like a big like cosplayer thing is like people dressing up as Wonder Woman. And, they tried to like reboot the series in the mid 2000s with Adrian Pilecki, but it never made it past the pilot series, which, would have been interesting to see because she's a tall drink of water as well. So
I'm sure we'll see something on HBO Max before long with something to do with her and her. I mean, I would so love to get a Kristen Wiig Cheetah series on HBO Max, with maybe Wonder Woman showing up at the end. Who knows? But that's just my personal opinion. All right, so back to Shawn. Shawn, why don't you finish off your DC Mount Rushmore?
All right, so I'm going to save the worst for last. Sorry, Tim, I'm just giving a dig. So you cannot, absolutely not have a Mount Rushmore without the most well-known DC character, which kind of started it all, is Superman. And I understand why Superman should be here. I love Superman as much as anybody growing up. Again, going back to as far back as the George Reeves TV series, which I don't know I'm sure, Andy, you've seen that. I don't know about the other two.
I've seen an episode here and there.
Yeah, so I watched that as a kid. Obviously, Super Friends. He had his own cartoons, multiple movies, the original Superman movie and Superman 2, I absolutely thought are fantastic. Superman 2 might, if in a vacuum, might be one of the greatest superhero movies of all time. It's a little dated now, but it was really well done. But fundamentally, he deserves to be there. I am not a Superman fan. I've read Superman comic books. They tend to bore me. I do think he's a very boring character at this point because he's very one-dimensional, but absolutely 100% he deserves to be on that Mount Rushmore for DC. So there was a time that I did like him. Yes.
All right. Scott had him on his list as well.
Yeah, we couldn't really leave him here. Everyone knows him with from Superman and Lois, the TV show from the mid-90s. Like that did surprisingly well in the ratings. I know it only got a couple of seasons though. I'm like Shawn. I may not be personally the biggest fan of Superman. I thought his best was the Injustice run. I read all like 300 comics of that covered like the 5 years, and you see like what happened and how like Superman became quote unquote bad, but he was coming from like a good spot because he lost Lois, and that was the thing tethering him to humanity. So him losing Lois, it was just heartbreaking because she was pregnant with a kid in that comic arc, and like he just went full like dictator after that. And I thought that was an interesting spin on Superman. not gonna lie, I can't really get into him in the movies. I tried to read some of the comics. He's too much of a goody two shoes with the
He's boring.
He's a Boy Scout, yeah, and nothing can hurt him besides something off planet. I'm sorry, Tim. I hear you. I apologize.
Scott, can I correct you on one thing? The best comic story is when he died. That was a good comic story.
It was a good comic story.
Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, Smallville, that ran forever. I know there's big fans of that. I didn't have WB at the time, so I haven't had a chance to go check it out.
I like Smallville. I bought them on DVD to catch up on them. I gave them to Criscolo. He loves it.
By the way, the current Superman in today's CW world, he's awful. I gotta say it.
I've heard good reports from that, but I haven't watched it. But no, the list would be incomplete without him. He's the one that pretty much kickstarted the DC Comics. So,
all right, and it was a clean sweep. Tim had him on his list as well.
All right, listen up, you motherfuckers. And I was going to be the diplomatic one in the room. We wouldn't have any goddamn superheroes if it wasn't for Superman. Not a one. There'd be no DC comics. There'd be no Marvel comics. There wouldn't be jack shit. We wouldn't even be doing this podcast. So sit up.
This is what I'm here for.
Sit up at attention and pay respect to the man. Doesn't have to be your favorite character. Doesn't have to be in the best comics, but it's fucking Superman. Take a seat.
Tim cut. That might be the best promo I've ever heard Tim cut. That was amazing.
Okay, there is a germ of truth to what I'm saying, even though I'm being very aggressive. You kind of have to respect Superman, even if you don't like. I'll put it this way: like, there's not a lot of like shorthand litmus tests of what I think of someone as a person, but if they don't have a little bit of, yeah, I can respect that when it comes to Superman, I kind of think you're an asshole. Like, again, doesn't have to be your favorite character. You don't even have to like Superman comics, but if you like superheroes and you like even like, what superheroes have become in pop culture, the movies and stuff, you really just have to tip your glass to Superman. I'm sorry. But you do. And I will say that as far as like there being bad or boring or one-dimensional Superman comics, yes, there are. But I think that's because he is a more difficult character to write well than other characters. But when he is written well, I dare say he's got better stories than, say, a Batman.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
what?
Yeah, and it's because he is very difficult to get right. But when he is, there are some Superman stories that are, to me, like downright pretty moving. When you look at just the core of the character, it's an immigrant story, right? He's this person who is not one of us, literally it is an alien, not from the planet, and becomes the best of us. And I think there's really something in there, especially when you compare that to Batman. Don't get me wrong. I think Batman's a really cool character. I think there's some, again, really good Batman stories, but it's kind of just an adolescent power fantasy. And there sort of isn't as much depth to me when it comes to Batman versus Superman. And I know a lot of people would probably try to argue against that, but that's just sort of how I've always felt about it, man. Like, Superman is just, I don't know, like, I could gush over the character on and on, but the fact is, obviously, he belongs on a Mount Rushmore. He's pretty much, again, similar to Batman, before you even know what a comic book is, you know who Superman is. Just has infiltrated all of media. Have there always been the best takes on the character? You look at the films, maybe not, but then again, you take it back to the Christopher Reeve movies where they really knocked it out of the park.
I agree with you on that.
And that's got to count for a lot, I think, back in a time when you just didn't get superhero movies. Certainly, again, he's been represented in animation a lot, toys, more theme park rides. Wasn't there a Superman coaster once again in the '90s?
Mm-hmm. I'm not a big fan of the one in New Jersey. It's one of the it's actually a flying coaster.
Flying coaster. Wow.
It's so basically what happens is they have one in Orlando too. It's the Manta, but you get on the roller coaster and you sit, and this thing gets you down, and not only is it like a harness over you, but your legs get like almost shackled, and then you get hoisted up, and you are facing the ground, and you are literally flying first time I went out, my friend says he goes nothing between us and the ground, but this harness is keeping us in. I'm like, all right, thanks.
Jesus Shut up now. God.
Yeah, but I mean the one in Florida is a better version of it, and there are other Superman roller coasters. The one at Six Flags New England is way better, and actually won a lot of awards a number of years ago. So they can get that right, Sean. Superman.
Well, that's something they got right. It's just he's as Mount Rushmore as Mount Rushmore gets. He's a character I find honestly very inspirational, because I know that myself as a reader of superhero comics, you kind of sometimes you want that very pure hero, someone who can do these extraordinary things that you as just an ordinary person could never measure up to, but can still speak to you and tell you that you and encourage you to be the best possible version of yourself, even though you can't literally move mountains. I think that's kind of what Superman is to me. And I talk about you wouldn't have these universes if not for superhero. Yeah, maybe, in a world where Batman is created but Superman isn't, we could maybe still get there. But think of all the other characters that have been directly inspired by Superman. You get, Scott talked about Injustice, which is like a direct commentary on Superman, but a bad guy, right? Sort of a what-if version of Superman. Marvel has really enjoyed and gotten a lot of mileage out of putting their own spin on, well, what if there was a Marvel version of Superman? None of these contrasts would exist if not for the big blue Boy Scout himself. So that's my piece on Superman. And again, I hope that maybe I change some hearts and minds who might be listening. If not, for you stone-hearted, cold-blooded motherfuckers who are on this call with me.
All right, so the only person that has a entry left on Mount Rushmore is Scott. Scott, why don't you give us your final entry?
I'm picking. I know this is going to piss Sean off. Tim's already laughing. But I went with number 4. He was number 4, Sean.
Well, wait. Before you say number 4, who did he not have that? Who did he not pick? Wonder Woman? Or he did have Wonder Woman?
Flash.
Okay, so this is one of those
Honorable mention.
Yeah, this is one of those that number 4 spot could go to multiple, and I would give you this one, even though he's a ship pick. I already know who it is. Go ahead.
My number 4 is Green Lantern, more specifically, Hal Jordan. Motherfuckers, that's right.
No, I mean, yeah.
No, he could listen. Honestly, it would have been him or Flash for me, to be perfectly honest. It would have been him or Flash.
So, I'm full disclosure. He's my favorite superhero. He, I think the Jeff Johns run on Green Lantern, I've read multiple times. It's just amazing. Yes, he had a shitty movie. It is really bad. I try to convince myself that it was good walking out of the theaters, but deep down I knew how bad it was. Ryan Reynolds shits on it to this day. But Hal Jordan has his flaws. I know, like, we were talking about, like, how Superman really doesn't, and, like, Wonder Woman does to an extent. And we all know Batman's flaws. He's fucking psycho. But, Hal Jordan has his flaws. And in the 90s, they did the whole thing where he went nuts and killed everyone with Coast City with the Emerald Dawn storyline, and he became the Spectre for a little bit until Jeff Johns brought him back in 2006. He doesn't get that much love. I know Green Lantern is made as a joke. Shawn always reminds me, oh, I wish I could will this to turn it into a dump truck, and so, or one podcast he said, Green Lantern would have turned him into a toilet and flushed him down the toilet. So, I just love the mythos of the Green Lanterns and Hal Jordan with that, and like I know
movie
a lot
too. Great movie.
I said that a lot of people my age flock to Kyle Rayner as their Green Lantern, but
Sorry.
Hal Jordan is mine, and he's just my number 4. That's all I can say. Like, they did make a decent movie. The First Flight animated movie is pretty decent. I have that on DVD. I'm looking at it right now. But I will say Flashpoint's one of my favorite comic book events. My favorite of all time is the Blackest Night event, which is something that Jeff Johns worked on for years, leaving little clues here and there until the Blackest Night event took over. And I just love that event so much. So much so that I'm trying to collect all the action figures that came out with that event right now.
It was an honorable mention for Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah. I kind of kid, but I don't actually dislike the character. I don't dislike the concept. In fact, I like the character of Hal Jordan quite a bit throughout the 90s. Kind of took to him in some of my early DC reading as a youngster. Although a lot of those stories were written by a rather terrible human being that we did not know about at the time. That's neither here nor there. I think I get a little bit sick of the overexposure of the character today, and just the Jeff Johns of it all to me, who, I mean, yes, I know Jeff Johns did a lot to revive not only Hal Jordan, but just the entire GL mythos, and has put that, he's kind of put a lot of characters through that Jeff Johns formula, and it works very well. It isn't often to my personal tastes necessarily, albeit very successful. I think what held me back from actually putting him down for the Mount Rushmore versus, somebody like the Flash is, again, what I was saying earlier about kind of the legacy nature of the character. That sort of holds him back for me, and not just the character himself, where, you've got just different, you've got the Golden Age, Silver Age, potentially Modern Age, if you're looking at Kyle Rayner versions of just an Earth-based GL, and then it goes back to Hal, and you've got Guy Gardner, and you've got John Stewart, and it all becomes very sprawling, right? And it's a kind of a big franchise unto itself now. It's in some ways a victim of its own success. And I don't know. I think when you ask average person on the street, hey, what do you think of Green Lantern? It's like, oh, the black guy from the Justice League cartoon. Yeah, he's pretty cool. And it's like, well, not who I was talking about. Oh, the shitty Ryan Reynolds movie? Well, no, not exactly. And it's like, who are you really talking about when you say Green Lantern? And it's just so sort of all over the place. Oh, the gay guy. Well, no, that's one of them. But, it's just, it's become kind of a lot. And to pick just one, I get that Hal Jordan as the flag bearer, but I don't know. It's just to concentrate a concept down to something that's very easily, I think, distilled for Joe Q public. That's why I went with the Flash over Green Lantern.
All right. Shawn had as an honorable mention as well.
Kind of because you have to, not because I wanted to. He would be like third tier bottom for me, because I have a couple others on my Rushmore runners up that I would put ahead of him. Listen, as a kid, it's kind of like Superman. As a kid, I dug the character, and I guess I've always viewed him as cartoony, in my opinion. And honestly, that could be generational based on the cartoons I watched him in. I did like a comic series that he had with Green Arrow growing up. Who did that? back
Neil
to the
Adams.
the Neil
And
Adams
Denny
run.
O'Neil.
Yeah, I enjoyed that run when they teamed up. I thought that was a really cool comic. But as far as
Our
him,
traveling heroes, man. Come on.
yeah, so him as a solo, no. The Ring stuff kind of gets old, and again, I might find the Ring hokey again because of my experience with those 70s cartoons. Goddamn, the Legion of Doom and the Legion of Superheroes, that's probably what did it to me. Then they had a really bad TV show that they did that he was one of the main characters, one of those special episodes. You know what I'm talking about, Andy? That 70s Challenge of the Superheroes or whatever, that was CBS.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so he was one of those really bad ones, and yeah, no, I'm not a Green Lantern fan. The movie was utter garbage, and I do understand why, though, Scott would put him as kind of that fourth tier, because a lot of people, that number 4 is wide open, and I could see how a lot of people would put him in there versus a Flash or somebody else. So I don't fault you for it, but just well known, I do not like Green Lantern, and he's only here in my runner-up because he has to be.
All right. Tim, you have any honorable mentions that we haven't mentioned yet?
Do I? Yeah. Well, I think Robin was one of them, only because everybody knows who Robin is, of course. But then once more you get into, okay, well, Robin, Tim Drake, does that mean Nightwing also, and sometimes Batman? Like, he's had a lot of identities over the years. But then you can't really say, well, no, how about Robin, Jason Todd, because he's just kind of a blip on the radar. There's Tim Drake, third Robin, kind of my personal favorite Robin, but I don't think anybody else.
Damian Wayne.
Wayne, Dick Grayson.
It's such a hand-me-down kind of, more of a title than a character. I mean, I guess you could just say Dick Grayson at the end of the day. I don't know. I felt like he's too derivative. I mean, he's more of a sidekick than a character onto his own. I know a lot of people would disagree with that. There's been, there's a Robin solo series. He's been in good stories, but it's just, Robin compared to somebody like Flash or even Green Lantern, he's kind of playing in the minor leagues.
All right. Any others that you want to throw out there?
I don't remember. Aquaman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Talking to fish.
Yeah, what can you say about Aquaman? He's got the mainstream recognition now with the movie. Jason Momoa makes everybody's moms hot. I know. Had the animated series back in the fucking 60s, right?
Yeah.
I have no idea whether it was good or bad. I don't think I've seen a single minute of it.
It was bad with Aqualad.
Well, they also did that pilot with
oh yeah, with the guy who was Green Arrow on Smallville, right?
Yeah. And Ving Rhames.
Yes.
I remember it came on a DVD in one of the Smallville seasons. I can't remember. I don't know what happened to it, but yeah.
I mean, my God, character was created in fucking 1941. He's never had the legacy issue that other characters have, where he's gone through a million different identities. It's always been Arthur Curry. I mean, from the Golden Age, Silver Age, and on. It's always been the same guy. Pretty rock solid. Been in some good comics. Got a lot of. I mean, people make the talks to fish jokes, but he's got a little fan base. I don't know. I could see a stronger argument for him than probably Green Lantern, honestly.
All right. Shawn, honorable mentions?
Yeah, so I also had Aquaman in there. I feel like he kind of had, again, going back to the Super Friends, and now he's got mainstream. I'll admit, the Aquaman we all think about with the orange top and the green pants is pretty bad, but he's pretty iconic. I also had Green Lantern as a run-up. Green Arrow is actually one of my favorites. I'm a sucker for these guys that don't really have powers, but kind of like Hawkeye, who I know Tim absolutely despises.
In the MCU, not in the comics.
Yes. But I loved Green Lantern. I loved Green Arrow. I think his character's great. I love Oliver Queen. The TV show I thought was absolutely amazing up until the last few seasons. I loved it. And I also had Robin in there as well. And, I was thinking about it. I'm with Tim. I was kind of like, is it Dick Grayson? Jason Todd, like right now, Jason Todd is really good because he's in Titans. He's the main villain in Titans this year. But if I were to put like a runner-up on a character as Robin, it kind of would have to be Dick Grayson. So I'm going to put Robin in general though on a runner-up.
Yeah, you kind of have to generalize it with him.
Yeah.
All right. Scott, any honorable mentions we didn't talk about?
I mean, just hearing these guys talk, like I was thinking of putting Robin, but like as Tim said, he felt like a sidekick. Aquaman, I really haven't never really been into him besides the.
Well, I understand that he sucks in general, but
yeah, the Momoa movies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know, I would do like Martian Manhunter as an honorable mention. I know I didn't send you that, Andy, but he was in the Justice League TV show. He was pretty good in some of the comics. He's always seen as like the heart of the team. So I would have thrown him in, but he just doesn't have that much exposure.
Yeah. I mean, after the Snyder cut, I think Cyborg would have been an honorable mention for me because I didn't like him at all. I wondered why the hell he was doing there. And then when you get the Snyder cut, it's like, oh, it makes sense. He's like the heart of this movie.
Yeah.
And you can understand that. But, you know, again, I didn't do one, or else you would have seen people like Firestorm and stuff from the cartoon that I loved as a kid.
Booster.
I like Firestorm.
Yeah.
You know, I think any of the big seven of the Justice League, you can kind of make an argument for that fourth slot.
Yeah.
Plus Cyborg, maybe. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about him.
All right. So that wraps up our DC Heroes Mount Rushmores. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the Marvel Hero Mount Rushmores with Shawn Kidd, Scott Shifflett, Tim Capel. I am Andy Atherton. Pop goes, nope, sorry. Mickey Mount Rushmore. We'll be back after this.
Great difference.
All right, Plays Nation Pop Experience. Welcome back to Making Mount Rushmore. We are talking all kinds of heroes tonight. We broke down the DC heroes. Now we're doing the Mount Rushmores of the Marvel heroes with Tim Capel, Scott Shifflett, and Shawn Kidd. I am Andy Atherton, and we're going to start off with Tim with his first entry on his Marvel hero, Mount Rushmore. Tim, take it away.
Okay, I guess I'll go kind of chronologically and start with a Golden Age hero. And that is my man, Captain America. Captain America, pretty much all the things I said for Superman go for Steve Rogers / Captain America as well. He's, I would say, effectively Marvel's closest equivalent to Superman, just character and personality-wise, if not in terms of powers. So in some ways, like, Captain America to me is even the better hero because he does all that he does without the extraordinary abilities that Superman has. So I've always responded really strong. He was like one of my first favorite superheroes for some reason. I don't know why. As a little kid, I like this goofball dressed up like the American flag so much, but I did, and I think his profile and his stock has risen so much over the course of these past, right on 10 years, right? Captain America: First Avenger, released in 2011. Here we are, 10 years later. He's had a really great run of films in the MCU. The character with the best solo outings, easily, hands down, of that franchise. And really comes off well in the ensemble films too. I think has made for for a character who likes Superman, it's tough to get right, is a tough sell for, I think, most people. They've really done well by him. And I think the average person on the street would be like, yeah, man, I'm down with Cap. I don't know that I would necessarily put him on this as a gimme. He would certainly be in consideration, but it's not the no-brainer that it is today. Like if we were making this list pre-MCU, that's done a lot. That's really worked wonders for this character. So, yeah, just give it up for Marvel's not first superhero, but kind of first superhero that's still around today. We'll put it that way. I don't know. Maybe you count Namor, Submariner, but is he really a superhero? It's Cap all the way. So
plus
yeah.
That is America's ass.
That is America's ass, and we get some Jack Kirby in here right off the bat here. You know, Joe Simon, Jack Kirby, rocking and rolling. So can't go wrong with Cap.
All right, Scott, you had him on your list as well.
Yeah, just what Tim said, and also probably with Endgame, the best scene, which I remember people going crazy in my theater, was when he picked up Mjolnir, and you know, I even had the little action figure on my desk of like the Captain American shield and him holding Mjolnir. It's just great, and I echo Tim's statements 100% about the movies. His 3 movies are hands down the best trilogy of movies. I mean, Winter Soldier is my number 1 MCU movie. And I know in the first half I said that Dark Knight was my number 1 comic book movie. Winter Soldier is my number 2 comic book movie. Like, that's how good it is. I love that movie. I remember walking out of the theater and thinking, oh my God, that movie was amazing. And also his comic books aren't that bad himself. Like, I've read like the Secret Empire, where they did the little thing. I mean, it was all over the place, but they did the thing where he becomes a Hydra agent, where he was a Hydra agent all along. And that's just, yeah, it's just crazy.
It's kind of hard to find truly bad Captain America comics. I'll
Cap Wolf.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Your window is basically sort of the early 90s.
Correct.
Yep. Even then, I have a hard time putting it down as bad because I have such a soft spot for Mark Grunwald. And again, it's a thing where those comics are pretty self-aware. Like,
yeah,
I mean, he knew what he was doing with that. It was just a goofy summer fun event, bi-weekly nonsense. Like, Captain America turns into a werewolf. Why not? Like, it's definitely not Shakespeare, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, Scott, I echo what you said about Endgame. You know, not only when he picks up Mjolnir, but when he catches it. And then the whole Avengers assemble. I mean, I'm literally getting goosebumps just saying it, talking about it, because that is probably one of the greatest moments in a movie for me personally ever.
I've never seen a theater response to anything like there was to that.
I literally paid to see it in the theater a second time just for that whole battle, but especially that scene. Yeah, I had to see it one more time before. There was no Disney Plus yet, I don't think, or anything like that. So I was like, we weren't seeing it for a little while, and I had to see it again. It was just that good, that chilling, that it just built up to that, and he just Chris Evans. I mean, who I used to kind of crap on as an actor years ago, but really turned into a solid performer, and really Cap was the heart of the MCU up to now. So. All right, Shawn, you had him on your list as well.
Yeah, everything the other guys have said. I mean, he is a Mount Rushmore. Like, when I think of Captain America, I think of the Marvel Batman. I think like Superman. Like he's that character for Marvel. It's kind of like the same way with like how I thought about Green Arrow. I didn't start reading Captain America really until they did that. They split the series with him and the Falcon in the 70s. They had that comic book, and I was really into that comic book. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was really my first. And then I really loved his run as the Avengers chairman. I thought he was always great as the leader of the Avengers in the comics. The movies, I agree with 100% what all you guys said. The trilogy of movies with Captain America is my favorite in the Marvel Universe. And I wasn't always the biggest Cap fan, but the movies are great. Some of his comic stories, like you guys brought up, have been really great. I also like Secret Empire, Scott. I thought that was a different little spin on it. So 100%, everything you guys said and everything more, he's 100% belongs on the Mount Rushmore for Marvel.
All right. So, Scott, give us another selection on your list.
Yeah, I actually went with Spider-Man right here. I think when you think of Marvel outside of Captain America, now you think of Spider-Man, especially growing up in the 90s. From like the TV show. I think there was a TV show in the 90s. I know there was one of the two. Yeah, the cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, one of the 90s. I couldn't remember if it was 90s or 2000, but then, like, besides the X-Men, like, the first Spider-Man movie with Tobey Parker was great. The second one's even better with Doc Ock. Third one sucked. And then we had the crappy ones with Andrew Garfield and Tom
Holland.
I almost called him Hiddleston, but I knew that was wrong. Holland.
No, he called Tobey Maguire Tobey Parker, but nobody said anything.
Oh my goodness, I'm tired.
Tobey Parker.
But Tom Holland really killed it. Like, I think he's doing great with Spider-Man. I
have such a crush on him. It's so bad.
But no, it's just like when you think of this, you think of Spider-Man, like, everyone knows the story with Uncle Ben. Like, there's the joke going around, who's not in the Spider-Man 3? Uncle Ben.
Wow.
But no, he's just great. I can't say any, like, we all know it, like, and his rogue gallery I think is one of the best, like Venom, Carnage, Hobgoblin, Green Goblin, the Lizard, Mysterio. I mean, hell, and going to the video games, they released the Spider-Man video game in 2018 for the PS4, which is just amazing, and released the Miles Morales quasi sequel for the PS5. Not even like there was a Spider-Man game for the PlayStation 2. The very first game that I ever beat was Maximum Carnage, and I remember it had Cloak and Dagger in it, and like Spider-Man.
Oh my god, that game caused me such anxiety. It's probably responsible for why I have an anxiety disorder to this day. But yes, I know with all the helpers and just God, trying to reach the end of the level without calling on your helpers and then having to fight 5 fucking bosses at the same time. Oh my God. Yes. Sorry.
No, it's fine. That's
using Cloak to wipe out everybody on the screen. That was amazing.
Yeah. No, see? And like, that's a game that came out 26 years ago.
Yeah. It had the red cartridge for the SNES, which was like so cool and a big deal at the time, even though it was just a gimmick. Yeah. Oh my. I want to reread Maximum Carnage now.
I mean, I have it on my list to do. Supposedly it's not that great, but
it's not, but it's fun.
Yeah. It's just great, and that's why he's my number 2.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this Spider-Man game is awesome. I'm still slowly working my way through Miles Morales. Haven't had a lot of time to play the video games lately, but he's really fun in the Marvel Lego games. I can tell you that much. Shawn, you had him on your list as well.
Yeah, my Spider-Man experience goes back again to the cartoons as a kid. The original, I guess it was 60s one with the theme song. Yeah, so I go back to that, and then
Electric Company.
Well, yeah, Electric Company would be another one. The Electric Company Spider-Man. One of my all-time favorite cartoons, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Which introduced us. I'd never seen Iceman before, and I know Firestar I think was created for the show, but I had no idea who Iceman was until I saw that show. He's just iconic. The movies, his character, his story. I brought up Batman's Rogues Gallery. I think Spider-Man, you could put his up there along with Batman's in terms of Rogues Gallery. Just a great character. 100% agree with Scott. He belongs. I won't add too much more. I think Spider-Man says it all in terms of a Mount Rushmore for Marvel.
All right. Tim, clean sweep. You had him as well.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So with Cap, I talked about if you made this Mount Rushmore at another time period, another decade, you maybe don't include him. I don't think there's any point in the history of modern Marvel, talking about Marvel from the 60s on, that you would not have Spider-Man on this list. More so than any character. Even, gosh, looking at DC, who is DC's flagship character? You could say, well, it's Superman, well, it's Batman. Go back and forth between the two. Spider-Man is hands down Marvel's flagship character. It is no contest. More so than any other character, to leave him off, you might as well not even do this. You might as well not even make this list. As far as I'm concerned, he's the only gimme for Marvel. The other 3 slots could be totally up for grabs. If you don't have Spider-Man, then you don't know what you're doing.
All right. That leads us back to Shawn. Shawn, give us another entry on your list.
All right, so I'm going to go a little different here. This might go off the radar a little bit, and some might wonder why, but I went with Wolverine. And the reason why I went with Wolverine is Wolverine kind of changed the game for me in comics. Like, when he came into the X-Men, and I remember reading the Dark Phoenix saga, and one of my favorite comics of all time was when he infiltrated the Hell Club during that run. And it was him versus the Hell Club, and I thought he was such a badass.
Hellfire Club?
Oh, the Hellfire Club.
The Hellfire.
Sorry, the Hellfire Club.
It's just shorthand.
Yeah.
Him and Toby Parker.
Yeah.
Toby Parker left the Hell Club.
The Hellfire Club was so badass, that whole comic with him just against all of them. That was awesome. And then, of course, you have the amazing Claremont Limited series, which is probably to this day still my all-time favorite limited series of all time. Just a great story. He was savage. He was a different character than what I was used to seeing in Marvel. He was a straight-up killer. And then he's got this whole backstory that they created and this whole world around Wolverine. The movies with Hugh Jackman, I thought that was amazing. So it was really hard because I think there's other characters that people would probably put in the Mount Rushmore. But I feel like Wolverine changed the game for us at a time where it was pretty complacent. Marvel was pretty complacent in terms of what they were doing. And Wolverine just started a whole new era for Marvel. So 100% I'm with Wolverine in the Mount Rushmore.
Well, Tim had him as well.
Awesome.
Yep, I sure did. So you make a great point that Wolverine changed the game for Marvel. He kind of changed the game for comics.
Indeed. Yep.
Think about how and this sort of checks 2 boxes for me, just in the sense that you want to have kind of an X-Men representative here. I know that Marvel, more so than DC, is kind of more divided into these little fiefdoms, right? Where you've got Avengers, you've got X-Men, you've got Fantastic Four. Yes, they all inhabit the same world, but they don't always play well together. And so for the X-Men, you've got to, if you're going to have one representative, I think you go with Wolverine, just because he is the most popular. Let's face it. Like, depending on the year, he might be Marvel's most popular character. Sort of neck and neck between him and Spider-Man. I would not consider him, again, Marvel's flagship. That is Spider-Man all the way. But just in terms of popularity, in terms of dollars generated, there's a time where maybe that's Wolverine more so than Spider-Man. And, the mainstream recognition is there, too, with, all the X-Men movies. But as far as, like, Bronze Age comics, he also serves the purpose of giving us a Bronze Age introduction for this Mount Rushmore, so that it's not just all, like, Silver Age characters, right? Or Captain America, I know he was introduced in the Golden Age, but modern Captain America revived for the Silver Age. And so it's nice to mix things up a little bit with him while still having that very iconic representation. He's kind of comics first anti-hero, which is going to start a huge trend that really continues to this day. And you think about how kind of bland and boring a lot of Bronze Age superhero comics were for both Marvel and DC. Wolverine comes along largely through the efforts of creators like Claremont and John Byrne and Frank Miller, and totally changes the game. So yeah, he very much deserves to be here. I could see the argument for excluding him just because he is so unlike the other characters that I personally am going to have on my list, that I think a lot of us are going to have. But is totally deserving. Look at, he's even changed to the point that today he's like almost an elder statesman of Marvel superheroes, which I don't personally like prefer that depiction of the character. I like him as more of the very wild card, sort of unpredictable firecracker that he was back in the day. But I totally get the evolution. I think it makes sense. I think it's organic to the character. He's a fucking Avenger now, right? So you don't really get more establishment than that. So yeah, it's really hard not to. It's kind of hard to argue. It's harder to argue against him than it is to argue for him, I'm finding.
All right. It was actually a clean sweep. Scott had him as well.
Wow.
Yeah, Bub. I'll put that vanilla midget on my list.
Vanilla midget. Thank you for that.
I got nothing really to add. Like, I really grew up with the X-Men movies, and he's like the face of the X-Men. Sadly, which conflicts with an honorable mention of mine that I have. But yeah, when you think of X-Men, especially with the movies, you think of Wolverine and Hugh Jackman, and I don't know how the MCU is ever gonna replace him as Wolverine, but that's another topic for another day. But
well, funny. Speaking of someone who is not a vanilla midget, Hugh Jackman is a tall drink of water, and yet still hard to picture anybody else, like you said, as that scrappy, diminutive character.
Yes.
All right. So, Tim, finish off your list.
Finish off my list. Who have I not mentioned? Well, this was pretty hard, and I was going back and forth between two characters, and once again, I gave it to the one due to the MCU edge, and that is Iron Man, Tony Stark. And I'll go ahead and say it. It was between him and the Hulk. But I think that his profile is risen so much over the course of these past, now coming up on like 15 years. Certainly the portrayal by Robert Downey Jr. Once again, he's a Stan Lee, Jack Kirby creation, going back to the 60s. So one of those founding fathers of Marvel. There's no way I would include this character if we were doing this list, like in the 90s and the early 2000s. It would probably be the Hulk. But I mean, when you look at and compare the two today, I couldn't pull the trigger on someone who I see as just kind of a character that kind of had his day versus one who is really beloved in the eyes of the general public. That's kind of what it came down to. I don't think that there are maybe a ton of great Iron Man comics, but also not a lot of bad. It's largely on the basis of other media more so than it is comics at this point for Iron Man. So he's a shaky one for me, but he gets in there.
Yep. All right. Scott had him as well.
Yeah, I put him in here, and this was just 100%. Like the fourth, like Tim said, the fourth pick for me was really hard on both of these. But I went with Iron Man primarily just because he kicked off $1 billion plus empire with the MCU. Even more than $1 billion, because I'm pretty sure Avengers Endgame made $1 billion itself, like a couple
billions of dollars.
Yeah, multi-billion-dollar empire. And he was a B character. He was a B plus character, and he got bumped to the top of the heap because Marvel and whoever they weren't Marvel Films, because they weren't with Disney yet, didn't have the movie rights to Spider-Man or the X-Men, so they had to dig in their bench, and they pulled out the bench, and they Robert Downey Jr., role of a lifetime right there is Tony Stark. And he, with him, I Love You 3000, sacrificed himself at the end of Endgame, spoilers, but it's just felt within the MCU. Like we saw it with the second Spider-Man movie, Far From Home. So that's the only reason why he's in here for me. But would you make multi-billion dollars? Because let's be real, comic books aren't making that anymore. You deserve a spot on this list.
Yeah. Although some people think, Spider-Man No Way Home is going to do Endgame numbers. Idiots. Anyway, well, there's a reason why Pop goes to the Chicago's basement. Shit, damn you, Tim. Pop goes to the couch with the four of us does so well because y'all are think great minds think alike. It was a clean sweep. Sean had it as well.
Wow. So this is also a clean sweep of villains and heroes between me and Tim, by the way.
Yeah.
So you guys said a lot of it. I went back just like Tim. I went between Iron Man and Thor. Iron Man and Hulk. And it's kind of like with Justice League. You know who your top three are going to be? This one was hard because you had Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, or Hulk, right? And I think a lot of people put Hulk in that bucket, even though he was in the Avengers for like 2 issues, I guess, at the beginning.
He's a footnote in their history.
Yeah, he's a footnote in their history. But I'm with Tim. The comics not so riveting. I mean, there was a couple good storylines. There was the alcoholism storyline, but then there was one comic that really popped me for Iron Man. And Tim, you'll remember this comic. It was the one where he had an affair with the Wasp while Tim was in jail. And I remember reading that comic book, and I was so enthralled with the story, and that's where I really got a true vibe for what kind of character Tony Stark really was. He was a bachelor. If you're going to turn around and you're going to screw around with one of your best friends who's in jail's wives, you got some character issues.
That was back when he was still very protective of his secret identity as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like Jan didn't even know that he was Iron Man. Why they were having that affair. So that one stood out. And I loved him in the Avengers. But then the movies, like you guys said, really brought him to life as a character. And to your guys' point, I think one of the reasons why Iron Man's on this Mount Rushmore is because of Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. made that character an icon, and you kind of have to put him on this list because of it. But yeah, so clean sweep for sure.
All right. So we got honorable mentions. We'll start with Scott. Any honorable mentions you got there?
Yeah. Do we name all of them, Andy, or
however you want to do it?
All right. Yeah. So I had Hawk and Thor, like these guys did, as my honorable mentions. I just couldn't pull the trigger because the top 4 for Marvel, it hates me to say this, are rock solid. Compared with the DC, like just with the name identity. And my last honorable mention was Cyclops, and I enjoy him as in character, but there's been a lot of character assassination with him recently, especially with the.
That's why he's so good. He's just a maligned character.
Yeah, it's because he's such a maligned character, but still,
yes.
You can't go long without having Cyclops front and center of the Marvel Universe. Yeah.
But he's still seen as the leader of the X-Men, not really Wolverine. I know, they had the TV show Wolverine and the X-Men, which is like, damn, fuck the rest of
it. Kind of an underrated show, honestly. As a big Cyclops stan, I thought that show was kind of really good, and it's a shame that it was canceled after one season.
What show was that? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Wolverine and the X-Men. It was from
the cartoon, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But Cyclops, I enjoy the Avengers vs. X-Men story. That's when, Scott actually kills Professor X when he becomes the Phoenix Force. It gets crazy. The Phoenix Force,
he had it coming.
I have a love-hate relationship with, but mostly hate just because it seems like a crutch. But
yes, thank you.
But he was done dirty in X3, and I hope we do, I know I was just saying, we can never replace Wolverine. Maybe we can get the Scott we deserve in the movies with whenever Marvel brings it. But I'd just like to have him a better representation for Cyclops instead of being cucked by Wolverine all the time.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Not to get on a whole, y'all know I love Cyclops. But in the way that I said, you don't really have these comic book universes without Superman. On a very more micro level, you sort of don't have Wolverine without a Cyclops. Right. The contrast is incredibly important, really, to both of their characters and their development over the years. I love them as uneasy allies. I love them as BFFs, as they kind of have been in more recent years. And would agree with Scott that Cyclops has been incredibly done dirty by many writers and Marvel as a whole over the years, and yet still managed to be quite enduring. There's a period of time where it seemed like he might have been written out and just been put out to pasture, but they can never seem to let go of him. So it's got to count for something. I can't say I would put him on my Mount Rushmore, only because, again, that I think you ask the average person on the street and they're like, oh yeah, the loser from the X-Men movies, which I will never forgive those Fox X-Men movies for what they did to the leader of the X-Men.
As great as Wolverine was, they did Cyclops dirty.
It was incredibly egregious that this is probably what most people's impression of the character is, and it is so incredibly wrong. So yeah, I have, that's what holds me back there. And plus, I mean, look, Wolverine is the flashier character, so these things you're rewarded more for the broad strokes than you are the nuances, I think.
I think Scott got the better chicks though.
That would be an interesting comparison also.
Well, that's a whole rabbit hole. Sorry, let's go.
That would be an interesting comparison.
Yeah.
All right, so Shawn, honorable mentions.
So Cyclops and his womanizing ways is on mine too. Hulk, I've already brought up. Thor, I brought up. So two other ones that I put on there, and these are ones that I really enjoyed. Daredevil was a comic I really enjoyed. Similar to that Batman kind of similarities. Blind hero, no real powers, has some pretty powerful storylines. If you really think about Daredevil comics, I won't go into the story. There's so many great Daredevil stories that are out there. I mean, Shadowlands,
Pound maybe the best. Stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then the last one I had was Professor X. So we kind of talked about there's no X-Men without Cyclops. There's no Wolverine without Cyclops. Well, there's no Cyclops without Professor X. Or Wolverine. Not. So, an iconic character. I really struggled. He almost made it in before Iron Man, to be honest with you. Before Iron Man.
Yeah, so. I can see that. I could definitely see that. Not mentioned. Look, I know how y'all feel. I feel the same way. I'm just going through, and I'll just say that the Fantastic Four gave me pause.
Because they suck.
Well, look, never my favorite characters, never my favorite comics. I don't think anybody really would say they are, but it's Marvel's first family, and it's sort of like, I don't know. I think there's somebody out there who just says, boy, a Marvel Mount Rushmore is kind of hard. Who are four characters? You know what? Fantastic Four are the Mount Rushmore. I think that's a terrible, lazy way to do it, but I could.
They got canceled. Their comic book got canceled.
I know. But they are incredibly important to the foundation of Marvel.
And by the way, the Solo Thing series, the first 10 issues of that are pretty damn good.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's like, if you're not going to just say the entire team is your Mount Rushmore,
it's Thing.
Yeah, if you want one representative from the FF, I could see putting the Thing on here, because he's the best character of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that last Fantastic Four movie it made the other two look like
Oscars. Oh my God.
I literally am in the theater with my kids, and at the end of the movie, I out loud, I said, "Who wrote this shit?"
Yeah.
Because they both looked at me, and they're like, kind of like, they were like, "Dad," and then I looked at them, and they go, "Well, yeah, true." Tim, any other honorable mentions that we haven't talked about?
I think we hit all of mine in some form or fashion.
You had one more. You had Captain Marvel.
Oh yeah.
Which Captain Marvel?
I don't know.
Marvel.
I don't even know. Part of me wants to say Carol Danvers, just because I feel bad that Marvel doesn't have its Wonder Woman, right? And I feel like they should, and I feel like she's the closest thing to it, but it is just sort of like, I don't know, trying to for the sake of diversity, for diversity's sake, sort of thing. Like, I couldn't see really giving her or anyone else, maybe Storm, but again, Wolverine's right there, so it's like, yeah. I did think of Black Panther. I could see like maybe more of a modern fan, more of a modern comics reader, or primarily movie fan putting like Black Panther on their mountain. I wouldn't do it, but it's conceivable.
All right. Awesome job, guys. As usual, you always bring the goods, especially when we're talking about comics and the like. But before we go, let's talk about what everybody's got going on in your social media presence. Shawn, what do you got to direct people to?
You can find me at NWA Crack and Roll on Twitter, and on this feed, you can find me on Battlestar in the 25th Century with Scott Shifflett. On the wrestling feed, I got NWA Crack and Roll, Chicken Salad, Highway to the Impact Zone, and YouTube Roulette. And once a month, you can catch me over on North-South feed doing Impact pod reviews off of their app shows that they do with Matt Souza. So those are all the things I got going on.
All right. Scott?
Yeah, I can be found at Scott_Shifflett on Twitter. On this pop feed, you can find me on Blockbuster Rewind with Eric and Andy. Shawn mentioned Battlestar, and with Pop Goes the Couch. On the wrestling feed, PTB and YouTube Roulette with Shawn, Logan, Souza, and Jake Williams.
All right. And Tim?
I guess it's a theme of fours, talking Mount Rushmore here. We have our quad of pods as well. So for more great comics-related content, check out our sister network. That is the Jenny Position, curated by Jennifer Smith. So Jenny and myself, along with Scott Criscolo and JT Rosero, do a show called The Journey Through Infinity, going chronologically through all the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, more than halfway through the journey. Our next outing is going to be covering Thor Ragnarok. It's going to be coming your way very soon. Depending on when you're hearing this podcast, may be available now on the Jenny Position. You may also be able to find that podcast episode on the North-South Connection Network. Lately, we've been kind of simulcasting or syndicating episodes of The Journey Through Infinity over on NoSo. So check that out on either podcast that you're subscribed to, but you should be subscribed to both. I do have a show with JT Rosero and a rotating guest each episode on the North-South Connection podcast network. That show is called 9021 No-So. That's right, going chronologically through the OG Beverly Hills 90210. New podcast we just started. We're only like 5-6 episodes into the series, but each episode of the show focuses on one episode of Beverly Hills 90210. I'm having great fun with it, and if you would like to be a future guest, just reach out to me or JT in whatever manner you prefer. Let us know. Hey, I want to be on. If you have a particular episode, whether it's from the first season, whether it's from the 10th season, just put in your name and we'll get you scheduled. So yeah, scheduling way far out for that one potentially. On the Place to Be Nation Wrestling Network, if you're a wrestling fan, I have a pair of shows over there. The first being Talkin' WCW with Jennifer Smith and Greg Phillips, and PTB NXT, me, Jennifer Smith, and not Greg Phillips, but Jacob Williams. So I think that'll do it as far as my podcast. You can follow me on social media at Cyke68, CYKE68 on Twitter. Yes, it's a reference to Cyclops, our honorable mention, Mount Rushmore.
All right. As for me, even though this is my primary home, you could hear me on the Place to Be Nation Wrestling Network with the sister show of this, the wrestling version. There will be an episode this month in September. I'm trying to remember what the hell we did. I don't remember. I think it was cage matches and ladder matches. So check that out, and then there'll be more episodes coming monthly. Evolution will be back soon. I'm really hoping for. It's just, sometimes difficult to book. And then also Great Debate, which I'm looking to bring back soon. Trying to maybe give that show a fresh coat of paint and change things up a little bit on that show, on both feeds, as well as this very feed. You can hear me all kinds of shows. Pop Goes to Classics Disney, that's dropping once a month. Miranda and Steve, we're going through the classic Disney animated features. We're into the late 70s, so we're almost in that second golden age soon. Only a few months away from that. Looking forward to that. Really, that you can't beat that. Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King. That is a heavy hitters lineup.
Hunchback.
Yep, we got Mulan,
Pocahontas,
we got Hercules. We got a lot good, but we have some good ones coming soon. We have a couple underappreciated onto the radar. We got Fox and the Hound coming soon, as well as Black Cauldron and Great Mouse Detective, Oliver and Company. So yeah, we got some sort of, I guess you might want to call them the B team, I guess.
No, those early '80s ones are very underrated, by the way.
Yeah,
I would agree.
They're good.
Yeah.
They're not blockbusters like the Golden Age ones, second Golden Age ones, but they are great movies themselves. The Muppet Pod will be back soon. Kind of tough scheduling wise when your co-host is 6 hours ahead. So we will get those to you as soon as we can. We have Sokovia. Blockbuster Rewind, like Scott said, will be back soon with me, him, and Eric, as well as Laughing Theater. I'm looking to start getting that up on the regular, as well as Blockbuster Rewatch. And check me out on Stream Lounge. I have a bunch of already done streams up there. I also, sometimes some of the catalog episodes of Laughing Theater are going to appear on there for your listening pleasure. So check those out. Ferris Bueller's Day Off with Steve Willie and Austin Powers International Man of Mystery recently went up on Stream Lounge. That one was with Greg Phillips as well. I thought I did good Austin Powers and Dr. Evil impressions, and Greg just puts me to shame. The guy can do, his voices are incredible. So
he's amazing.
Yeah, just check that out. All kinds of fun stuff. And more Stream Lounge coming soon, very soon. So check all that out. Check out the website, PlayStation.com. Each and every day we have all kinds of articles, plus all the pods from, as Tim said, the Quadapods are featured on there. So it's your one-stop shop for all the pods. So I want to say a big thank you, though, to Shawn Kidd, Tim Capel, and Scott Shifflett for joining me on this episode of Making Mount Rushmore. And we'll check you out on the next episode, and stay tuned for whatever we're going to be doing next on Pop Goes to the Couch. Take care, everybody.